Hey there, welcome to episode 336 of Mike's Collection. I'm Mike, and the part of my collection that I'm going to be talking about today is just some miscellaneous stuff. Generally, when I do these videos, I try to do a theme where it's all G.I. Joes or all Marvel Legends, something like that. But I do collect a lot of little odds and ends that don't really warrant, like I don't get a whole wave of these particular things. So when I have enough kind of odds and ends items, then I have to do one of these miscellaneous episodes where I kind of lump them all together. So hopefully you enjoy it. There are some pretty cool toys that I have to review here today. Most of them I ordered from Big Bad Toy Store just in the last 2 weeks or so. And then I also have a couple of things that aren't really new. They're new to me, but I have some older action figures that were recently gifted to me that even though they're not new, I still like to show you guys everything that I get and add to my collection before I can file it away on one of my shelves here somewhere. So I am going to show you some of these figures, even though they're a couple years old. But yeah, I think that's really all I have to say. Maybe I'll throw a quick little happy Thanksgiving out there to my fellow Canadians as I am recording this on Thanksgiving weekend, which is different than the Thanksgiving weekend in the United States. But yeah, so anyway, happy Thanksgiving. I hope you enjoy these toy reviews. So I'm pretty excited about this first figure I have to show you. This is the female Muto from Godzilla, the 2014 movie. Now, I don't know why it took 10 years to get a proper action figure of this character, but it did. I would argue that this is sort of the first Muto action figure ever. Now, there have been a couple of things that weren't really widely available. I've certainly never seen any products in stores, but I think when the movie first came out, there was a little mini playset that came with a couple little buildings and a little Godzilla and a little Muto. But, that's more like for children and a very small scale. And I think they've done a couple really stylized, cutesy, almost Funko Pop style Mutos in other lines. But as far as just a straight up action figure that represents the character as we saw them on screen, this is the first. So it's been a long time coming. And I pre ordered this figure, I want to say close to a year ago. It's been a long wait. And then I started seeing people online getting this figure probably 3 months ago, and all kinds of reviews went up. And I was still just waiting. My pre-order was not being fulfilled, so I just kept waiting and waiting and waiting. And then finally, about a month ago, my pre-order finally came through, and I had them ship it from Big Bad Toy Store. And here it is, and it's pretty cool. Now, not only was I excited to get this figure because it is, the first Muto that I've been waiting years for, but also because it's my first figure from Hiya Toys. Now, Hiya Toys, I'm not sure how long they've been around. I think they were doing a lot of, you know what? I don't even know what they were doing before this. I didn't pay any attention to them until their Godzilla line came out, and that really just seems to be in the last few years. And they've been putting out a lot of what looks like really cool figures at really good price points. Like this figure here, I believe was about $55 US, which is a little bit more expensive for me. This is probably about $75 Canadian, and it might not look like much, but it is a pretty detailed figure. There's lots of articulation, and when it comes to Godzilla figures, you're not really going to find them much cheaper than that these days. When it comes to buying Godzillas, you can either go from Super7, which those figures retail for about 85 US, and here in Canada, you're lucky if you find them for about 120, 125. Once you factor in shipping and stuff on those things, they're getting really up there. And then SH Monster Arts, just as expensive, if not more so. So yeah, Godzilla toys, I don't expect them to be cheap. So that's why I was kind of puzzled when Hiya showed up on the scene and they started selling what looked like really nice figures for really respectable prices. So I've been considering buying one for a while. The only thing is they've mostly been making Godzillas based on the American legendary movies. And I didn't really feel like I needed a Godzilla or a Kong from Legendary because I already have those from other companies. So I was hoping they would do something different. Now, they did put out a really nice King Ghidorah earlier this year, which I had on pre-order, and I ended up canceling it just because, for one, money was a little tight at the time, and that figure was a little bit more expensive, but rightfully so. It's a really big figure with a huge wingspan, and that was another problem. I was worried the wingspan was going to be so big, I really didn't know where I was going to display it. Now, that's not to say I'll never get that figure, but I didn't think I wanted it to be my first Hiya Toys figure in case it didn't live up to my expectations. So I thought I would wait for this Muto to come through. I also have a Godzilla on pre-order from them, and I have Shimo from the latest Godzilla X Kong movie. So by the time I get those figures, I'll have a really good sense on what Hiya can do. But based on this figure alone, I'm already impressed. So it came in a good sized box. The box I thought looked nice, but it was nothing fantastic. It didn't have any like original artwork on it really. It looks like it kind of has some still images of the city skyline from the movie. So yeah, it's a fine looking box, but I was initially surprised to open up that box, find a whole bunch of plastic. Like this guy was kind of clamshelled in between these two really big hunks of plastic, and he was kind of small. That was my initial thought. Like you can see the size of him in my hands, or I should say her. This is the female Muto. If you remember from the 2014 movie, it's been a while since I've seen it, but initially the female Muto comes up out of the ground and, spoiler alert, kills Bryan Cranston, and then later we get a smaller winged Muto, which is the male. So I'm hoping that we get the male as well. But if I was only going to get one of the two, I wanted the female one, just because it's size-wise, it's more comparable to Godzilla. It feels like a better adversary, and this is the more recognizable. Like this, the female one does a lot more in the movie than the male one. So yeah, I'm glad that we got this one first. But I think she sold quite well, and so based on that, it seems like a no-brainer for them to produce the male Muto next. But yeah, very very cool, but kind of small. Like if I just bring in some figures to compare to. So here she is next to a couple of 6-inch figures. So this is one of Hasbro G.I. Joe's Classified line, one of Hasbro's Marvel Legends. These are both figures that I have pending reviews coming. So if you want to hear more about Stalker or Crystal, stay tuned for another video. But you can see how she compares to them size-wise. So she's not quite 6 inches. I'd say maybe more like in the 5.5 inches tall. Here she is next to a Masters of the Universe Origins figures. They are about 5.5 inches tall. So yeah, pretty similar, especially when you put her like fin up here. Then I think she matches Clawful pretty closely. But size-wise, who really cares how she compares to a G.I. Joe or a Marvel Legend? You are probably not going to be displaying her with those guys. You probably want to see how she sizes up with a Godzilla. Now, I'm guessing that she will size up quite nicely with Hiya's Godzilla figures. But I don't have any of those. This is my first Hiya figure. But I do have a bunch of NECA Godzillas. So here is one of NECA's Godzillas based on the legendary films. So this would be the Godzilla that you would pair up with the Muto. And I think the scale looks pretty good. I don't know exactly, but those guys definitely don't look out of place together. I think that definitely works. Kind of hard. His tail's so long, so it's hard to get a different angle here, but there you go. I think this works really well. And even if I never got a Godzilla figure from Hiya, I think just style-wise, like the way they've got this kind of matte finish and the amount of detail, she blends in perfectly with the NECA figure. So I think she'd look really great displayed on my shelf with those guys. But yeah, I'll be curious to see how she sizes up with the Hiya Godzillas once I get some of those in hand. Now here she is with another legendary Godzilla. This one is based on his evolved look with the pink fins from the Godzilla X Kong movie. But this is just a cheap little Playmates figure, very simple, not very detailed. But even if this is the only Godzilla line you collect, but you wanted to add a Muto to the line because Playmates didn't make one, you can see even these guys look pretty good together. She kind of blows them away detail and articulation wise, but as far as scale goes, they still look pretty decent together. Now, the two Godzilla lines that I'm most actively collecting right now are both from Super7. I'm buying their Ultimates figures. So here is one of their Ultimate Godzillas with the Muto. And as you can see, Godzilla is quite a bit taller. Now, I think that is pretty out of scale. I don't think it necessarily looks bad. Like, who's to say Godzilla couldn't be a little bit taller than her? But from what I remember in the movies, I think it was closer to the scale with the NECA figures. Like, she was pretty much the same size, at least height-wise, as Godzilla. So yeah, this doesn't really work. But anyway, there's that. And if you want to go the other extreme, here she is next to a Super 7 reaction figure Godzilla, in which case now she towers over Godzilla. So yeah, if you wanted to make her seem really menacing, I guess you could display her with your reaction figures. But again, I think the NECA figures and probably the other Hiya figures is the best way to go. Now, she didn't come with any accessories, which I'm actually okay with. It would have been nice. There's nothing that immediately comes to mind that she needed. But even like, I love getting little buildings and stuff. It would have been nice if maybe she had a little tank or something. But I also hate paying for accessories that I don't really need to justify the company's jacking the price up, which is what I feel Super 7 kind of does, is they give me 20 pairs of hands and then they charge me way too much money. I don't need all those hands. There might be a handful of people out there that love changing the hands on their Godzilla every 2 days. I don't. Most of those extra parts go in a bin, never to be seen again. So the fact that Hiya can offer up these figures at what I think is really reasonable prices, if that's why there's no kind of extra accessories, I'm okay with that. The figure is really what I'm buying, and as long as the figure's nice, I'm happy. And this figure is nice. So we'll get up nice and close here so you can see some detail. And this is probably the most detailed look I've ever really gotten at the Muto, because they were a little hard to see on screen. That movie is pretty dark. These characters get cut away from. The camera doesn't really hold on them for really long periods of time. And I was thinking they were much slicker looking. Like, you can see all this kind of chiseled up detail, almost looks like a branch of a tree, which I really like. But I was expecting them to be much smoother because that's what I remember from the movie. But maybe that's just because they were always in the dark so much, and maybe they always really were this detailed. But I think it looks really good. You can see on her underbelly here, lots of detail, some different paint apps to kind of break up the color. Because that's another thing, is she just seemed to me like a solid black shape with some red eyes in the movie. But here, she definitely has those red eyes, which are still pretty creepy because they're not very well defined. Like, there's no really clear sculpted eye there. But again, I think that's true to the character design. But yeah, colors wise, you can see it's not just a solid black. In fact, I'm not even sure which color it is, but there's like browns and there's grays. Like, it doesn't look non-accurate, but it's just really interesting to see, like, oh, this is what I was seeing on screen and didn't even realize it. Yeah, really nice sculpting, really nice paintwork. I'm pretty pleased with it. Now, the joints are a little tight, and when it comes to toys like this, I would always recommend you take a hair dryer to them to kind of really work the joints before you mess around with them too much. So I haven't really worked all the joints on this over, and I might need to do that before I put her in anything too dynamic. But so right off the bat, you see her head here. Her head's attached to this fin, so the fin can kind of tuck away like that, but you can lift the fin up, and it's just kind of a soft piece there. And then her head kind of ducks down a little bit, but that's kind of cool. She has an articulated jaw, and you can see she's got a little tongue in there, so that's pretty cool. So she's got these main kind of front arms, so they have a good range of motion. You can lift those right up. Then there's another joint on them there. They also spin. Another joint there, and you can curve those in, and another joint on the edge, so you can kind of lift those up Anyway, you can see right there how big the joint is. So you can swing these things right around. I'm just a little leery to do it, but there you go. So yeah, really good range of motion on the legs. Then these other side legs, they've got the same thing, articulation at the end, articulation here at what we'll say is the elbow. But then it's also got this kind of butterfly joint. So these legs can spin around. So you can see this one here, I've got it kind of leaning back, but this one swings right around. So good motion there. The legs on the back, they can move back pretty far. So she can kind of stand right up on her hind legs and makes her quite tall. Then even these little legs underneath, there's articulation on them, so they move around. She's got this kind of swivel joint in the midsection there, so she can move around. So yeah, she's very creepy looking. Like, it's very spider-like. Lots of appendages, a lot of movement. You can do a lot of things here. I'm very impressed. I didn't think this figure looked like it lended itself to a whole lot of movement, so I'm pleasantly surprised by how well it moves. And yeah, I think it's great. I'm really impressed with Hiya and with this figure. But I think I've rambled on long enough, so maybe we move on to the next thing. So we'll stick with Godzilla for the time being. This here is a Funko Pop of Shin Godzilla. Now, if you're not familiar with Shin Godzilla, it came out in 2016, and it was one of the Japanese Toho Studio Godzilla movies. So similar to this year in 2024, we got one of the American legendary movies with Godzilla X Kong, but we also got Godzilla -1 out of Japan. And one of them was a big, dumb, fun action movie. The other one was actually really critically acclaimed, and it was a bit more of a thinker and everything. And I'm really happy that it has performed so well. Well, a couple of years back, not only were we getting the 2014 movie from Legendary, but a couple of years later, we got a kind of cool new reimagining of Godzilla from Japan called Shin Godzilla. And it was, it was a pretty crazy redesign for the character. It was a really good movie. If you haven't seen this, I recommend you seek it out. You can see just from the profile there that it's a different looking Godzilla. It was quite the change. And the fact that he's got all this red showing through him, that is a different look for Godzilla. And you also notice his tail is quite weird. It's got a little face on the end of the tail. Yeah, very, very strange design. The fins. I don't think it translates as well to a Funko Pop. And I kind of wish the Funko Pop was maybe designed a little differently to kind of, he feels a little bunched up together there with his tail the way it is. I kind of wish he had a little bit more room to breathe there. But it's pretty cool. I don't buy a whole lot of Funko Pops anymore. I really try not to. But when I see something really cool like this, and Shin Godzilla is a movie that doesn't have a whole lot of merchandise, like these current crop of legendary movies, there's multiple companies making multiple toys, and they're all over the place. But when it comes to Shin Godzilla, there wasn't a whole lot of love. There was a Godzilla figure from NECA. There was actually two. So I've got one here, so you can get a better idea of what this Godzilla looked like and how creepy he was, and how you can see that red color kind of popping through his skin. He almost looks like he's been charred or something, and it's really quite disturbing. So yeah, I really like this NECA Godzilla. And by the way, maybe we'll bring the Muto back out here for a second. You can see how these two size up. Works pretty well. But yeah, so this Funko Pop is just kind of a fun little thing to get. I like to see Shin Godzilla getting some love. But who knows? Maybe Hiya or maybe even Super7 will revisit this movie at some point in the future. But for now, I just thought I should grab this before it's gone. So yeah, pretty cool. So the next figure I have to show you here, I'm pretty excited about. I think it's really cool. This is Thulsa Doom, as portrayed by James Earl Jones in the original Conan movie starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. So I've always been a fan of Conan, but my fandom really stemmed from those Arnold Schwarzenegger movies. I've seen them multiple times. I just really enjoy them. However, I've become a much bigger fan of Conan just this past year than I ever was before. Not only is it because I'm finally getting action figures of Conan and his his enemies and stuff, which I've never had before because there really hasn't been a whole lot of Conan action figures available. But since Super 7 got the license, they've been putting out Ultimates figures and they've been putting out reaction figures. But also a friend of mine he loves Conan a ton, and he was inspired by the original novels by Robert E. Howard, and he has recently written his own swords and sorcery novel with a character that's very much like Conan. And so, just to kind of be a supportive buddy, I bought my friend's book and I read through it, and I didn't expect to like it as much as I did. It was, it was really, really well done. I'd recommend you all track it down. It's called To Walk on Worlds. It's available on Amazon. But anyway, I enjoyed it so much. I thought, well, you know what? He's emulating his hero in Robert E. Howard. Maybe it's time I actually went and read the original Conan stories by Howard. So I did. I bought a collection of all the original Conan stories, everything that Robert E. Howard ever wrote. And I got through about half of it. I did get a little sidetracked. I do intend to go back to it soon. But then I also started buying Conan comic books, which I'd never really done before, from the original Marvel run of the 70s and 80s. And I'm really enjoying that too. So now I'm reading the books, I've seen the movies, I'm reading the comic books, collecting the toys. So yeah, I find myself a much bigger Conan fan than ever before. And I'm really excited about this figure. I think he looks great. Now, this figure is largely a repaint of a figure that Super 7 released. Was it maybe 2 years ago? A year ago possibly, but I think it was 2 years ago. So they released a wave of Conan figures. Their first ever wave of Conan Ultimates consisted of Conan and Thulsa Doom and Thulsa Doom's two henchmen. And I was tempted to buy the whole series. However, these figures are quite expensive. As I mentioned when talking about the Godzilla ones, a standard figure like this from Super 7 retails for $55 American, which turns into about $75 to $80 here in Canada. It's not cheap. And to be honest, these figures are not really of a higher quality than most of the stuff I get from Hasbro. They're pretty similar in size, and most of those figures even have more articulation than these figures. So it's kind of hard to justify the $80 price tag on these sometimes. But anyway, that first wave of figures, I didn't go all in on it because the Conan was I think what they called Pit Fighter Conan, and it wasn't the look from the movie that I thought was very iconic. It's really just seen in a very short montage in the movie, and I was like, surely they'll do a better Conan than this at some point down the road. So I thought, well, you know what? Maybe I'll just get Thulsa Doom because he looks really good. But I waited, and then he was sold out, and I missed my chance. So the henchmen would have been cool, but I was okay not buying them. Conan, I was waiting for a better version, but I did want the original version of Thulsa Doom. He was wearing the same armor, but I missed out on him, and I was kind of bummed about that. Then they continued to make Conan Ultimates figures. I have, I think, 3 different versions of Conan now. My favorite one being the War Paint Conan. So I think the likeness on this one is much better. They keep getting better with each release, I think. I love the War Paint look. I love the blood spatter on this guy. So yeah, there's my favorite Conan from Super 7's line. And once I had this one, I was like, well, now I need a Thulsa Doom. I missed out on the first one, but then they released the ceremonial Thulsa Doom. So this is him here. He's got real soft goods. He's got his sandals on there. He's got this weird kind of mesh or net cape. And this was a cool look, but it didn't really feel like it's exactly what it's called. It's ceremonial. Like, I can't really imagine this guy fighting that Conan. It just didn't really fit. So I was still kind of bummed that I missed out on the original kind of warrior version of Thulsa Doom. So I was very happy when they announced they were going to do another wave of Ultimates with, they're going to re-release this one. I think this is called Battle of the Mounds. So they did a new version of Conan in his Battle of the Mounds outfit, along with Subutai and Valeria, which are his 2 kind of sidekicks in the movie. And then we also get this new version of Thulsa Doom called the Battle at the Mounds version of of Thulsa Doom. Now, I don't really remember, even though I've seen the movie quite a few times, I don't remember if his outfit really does change from the beginning of the movie to the end. I don't know if it was just an excuse for them to re-release this figure that they had already invested in the tooling, but that was fine with me. I thought I was basically getting the same figure that had come out before, and I was fine with that because I wanted it in the first place. But once I got it in hand, I was actually surprised to see how many differences there were. Like, it looks like the base body is pretty much the same. So everything from the boots, the pants, the belt, the chest, all that stuff, even the head. But I think the paint job on this head looks better from what I can tell. Also, this cape is a whole new piece, and it's a wired soft goods cape, so you can pose it by bending the wire in it, which is really cool. I always like when you can do that. So I knew the old one didn't come with a cape, but I didn't really realize that this one didn't have the same kind of. The version one had this almost like fur coat or a fur cape, but it wasn't made of soft goods. It was made of heavy rubber plastic, and it draped over the front and back of them. And when I look at that figure now, I think, yeah, it doesn't look great. I don't love that big, heavy, thick plastic fur hanging down the front of him. It looks like it would really limit his movements. So I think this is not just the inclusion of the cape, but the uninclusion of the like fur cape, I think is a big improvement. Also, I think the paint job on this one is much nicer looking. It's got a lot more color to it, from what I can tell. The one thing that's maybe a little bit of a downside is I kind of would have preferred him in gloves. I don't know why. He's got his armor on. It just makes sense to me that he would have some gloves on. Maybe it's screen accurate that he had gloves at the start of the movie and didn't have them at the end. Maybe that's why Super7 did it. But the original version had gloves on. This one, they decided to take them away and just give him his bare hands. For accessories, he's got these snake-headed daggers. So those both come out of their little sheaths there. So that's pretty cool. He's got this other knife, which is two snakes kind of intertwined. Otherwise, he's got an alternate head. So this is pretty cool. This is him with his helmet on. Again, you get the snake motif because he's kind of like a snake god. So that works pretty well. He also came with a bunch of extra hands. So I've got the gripping hands there. He's got these kind of open or flat karate chop kind of hands. He also has some closed fists, so he can duke it out with Conan. And then he has the same bow with a bendy string and a snake arrow. So those same accessories came with the ceremonial version. I think the accessories differ. Otherwise, I think the version one Thulsa Doom had like a big sword and maybe some other bladed weapons, which I kind of would have liked because as much as these little daggers are cool and they have some cool detail on them, I don't think he stands much of a chance against Conan with this ridiculously oversized sword. It would not be much of a matchup. So I do kind of wish that he came with a sword of his own. However, I think I have a couple extra swords floating around from previous Conan releases that I'm sure I can find a more menacing weapon to give to old Thulsa here. So I won't bother going into all the articulation. If you have any of these Ultimates figures, or if you have any Masters of the Universe Classics figures, you kind of know what to expect because they're built pretty much the same way. It's a little dated, to be honest with you. Like, the range of movement is pretty limited here. They've got double jointed knees and elbows, so that's as far as the elbow bends. Most Marvel Legends and stuff nowadays have two joints, so you can they can like reach back and touch their own shoulders. Same as double jointed knees allow figures to reach their leg back and kick themselves in their own butt. This figure here has got that much range of movement, so it's not a lot. So yeah, if you want super dynamic poses, these Super7 figures might not be what you're looking for. But for me, I just want something that looks really cool on the shelf, and this fits the bill. I actually like this more than I expected to, especially just once I looked online and compared it to the original release. I was just so impressed at how much they seem to have improved this figure. So I really am glad I waited and got this one and missed out on the first one. The likeness to James Earl Jones looks great, by the way. You might not think so if you haven't seen the Conan movie, if you're just remembering him from his other roles, which were largely, he was much older in a lot of the roles that he's famous for. Like I think of Field of Dreams, for example. He was a little more heavy set and he had the white hair. But yeah, when you go back and watch Conan, this is what he looked like. He had those creepy kind of dead eyes and those weird bangs. It looks really good. The only thing I would kind of question is I don't know about the skin tone. He might be a little too light skinned. It doesn't quite match up with this version. Although I kind of felt the same about this. Like that guy kind of looks like a white guy to me. I think this skin tone's, it's a little more, it's a little browner, but I still don't know if it's accurate to James Earl Jones. Just skin tone wise compared to Conan. But anyway, it's close enough. I think it's awesome. Actually, I love this figure. Really great stuff. So yeah, happy I got him. So next up, I've got some Masters of the Universe figures. Now, I actually wasn't planning on talking about these guys in this video, but I just happened to notice them sitting here on my desk, and I thought, you know what, maybe I will lump them in here. Because I have enough Masters of the Universe figures that I could probably just devote my own video to them. But if you watch my videos regularly, you know that I collect the Masters of the Universe Origins line, which is, here's an example. This is Demo Man. I just reviewed him in my last video. You can see he's quite a bit smaller. This is a line of 5.5-inch figures, and they're styled after the little squatty Masters of the Universe figures from the 80s, and I'm a big fan of this line, so I'm all in when it comes to collecting Origins. But what you're looking at here, these are part of Mattel's 7-inch line that I guess we could call it Masterverse. I think it started out being called Revelation because it was based on the new Netflix animated show. But they've kind of started off doing little subsets within the line. It's New Eternia, it's Masterverse, it's whatever. I'll just refer to it as Masterverse figures for ease. But anyway, so I've got these three here. Now, the reason why I'm not devoting a whole video to them, even though these are pretty great figures, it's because every quarter I do a best action figures of the quarter video. And I don't like to drone on about the details of the figures in those videos because, I've got a lot of figures to go through in each one of those videos. I don't really have time to talk at length about each one. So what I try and do is review every figure that I got each quarter before I sit down to do my best of the quarter. Now, when it comes to these three figures, I did not have a chance to review them before I had to do my best of quarter 3 video just a couple of weeks ago. So in that video, I already talked about these figures a little bit. So if you're a regular viewer, you've already seen these figures. You've already heard me say what I like or don't like about them. So it does seem a little pointless to go and do a big in-depth video about them all at this point. However, I do have another figure to add that you haven't seen because I just got him in the 4th quarter. This is Beastman, based on the live-action Masters of the Universe movie from, what was it, 1988, I think? So yeah, this is a new figure. I had pre-ordered him on Big Bad Toy Store. He just arrived in the same box that I got the Muto from. So yeah, you guys haven't seen him yet on my channel. So I'll quickly talk about all these guys. I like them all quite a bit. Mer-Man is one of my favorite characters ever from everything, and this is a good figure. Leech, he's another guy I really love. This is Teela as the Sorceress. So she's kind of taken on this whole snake vibe. She's got the green skin. And it's kind of a nod to her look from the original mini comics when Teela and the Sorceress were kind of mixed together into one character called the Goddess. So this is kind of her goddess look. And then, of course, we got Beastman from the live-action movie. Now, in my best of the quarter, both Mer-Man and Teela advanced to the next round. So that should give you an idea of how much I like these figures. Out of the almost 80 figures that I bought in the last quarter, these were 2 of the 15 that I thought were good enough to be considered for best of the year. So yeah, they're really, really good. Teela here, it's a really pretty sculpt. It's a really nice face sculpt. yeah, just solid all around. I like this. She's got this kind of snaky train on her outfit here. So it's like soft goods. And it's really kind of like oversized, kind of exaggerated, but it's cool. I like it. It's a unique look we haven't seen on Teela before, even though it's reminiscent of the goddess figure that I already have in my collection. It's not the same. Merman, this is definitely, similar to other mermans I have, but it does have a bit of a unique take on it. They've tweaked his armor slightly. You can see he's got his spear here. He also has his kind of corn on the cob style sword that attaches to his back, which is cool. The most unique thing about this figure, I think, are the eyes. It's got this kind of clear plastic, like bulb glass, almost like a dome over his eyes, and it really gives him this kind of creepy look. So that's the thing that really makes this figure stand out. And yeah, really, really cool. And then Leech. This is a cool look for Leech. It's based on the animated series. So again, just a really cool look, really cool character. I've always liked Leech, but the original toy, his face was just a big suction cup, which was a little goofy looking. I actually have him on hand. Maybe I'll grab my other Leeches for a sec for a quick comparison. So here is my vintage Leech toy from my childhood. So you can see he was kind of short and squatty in that like 5-inch scale. And the side view kind of looks similar. You can see what they were going for. But then to make his action feature work where he would stick to the window, he's got an actual suction cup on his face, and he will actually still suck here. There you go. So yeah, he'll still stick. So that was, it's a cool, fun feature, but it kind of hindered the sculpting on his face. With more recent versions of Leech, like here he is from the Classics line, so you can see they kind of gave him a real head sculpt. It no longer works like a suction cup, and it's a lot kind of creepier and scarier. When they did the Origins figure, they gave him the option. You could either have a head based on this one, or he came with a suction cup head. Both are kind of fun, but I went with this version. So you can see all these Leeches, they have some similarities. They share a lot of similar characteristics. But I liked the color of this guy. I liked the changes they'd done in his uniform. It was different enough to justify my purchase. And yeah, I think he's pretty cool. So let's talk a little bit about this Beastman, since this is my first opportunity to do so. Now, if you're in the same age range as me, which is to say mid to late 40s, you probably grew up with Masters of the Universe since the very beginning. I remember when the toy line first launched, in the early 80s. I was there right since Wave 1, and I loved these figures right from the get-go, and I still love them today. They have some really endearing characters. Beastman is a great character. And when I found out they were going to make a live-action movie, I was obviously excited about it. That was not common in my youth. Nowadays, sure, there's G.I. Joe movies and Transformer movies. We don't have to talk about the quality of all those things, but it's not that uncommon for a toy line to be made into a movie. But at the time, it was quite the novelty, and it was pretty cool. And then the movie came out, and I was kind of like, I think what a lot of fans thought is, what the hell is this? The whole movie was basically set on Earth, and if you know Masters of the Universe, they've got their own planet of Eternia. There's all kinds of monsters and robots and spaceships. It's kind of a more sci-fi / barbarian, and we didn't really get either of that. There was a little bit at the start of the movie and a little bit at the end, but mostly to save money on their budget, they placed it on Earth, and a lot of the characters from the cartoon that we loved weren't included. For example, everybody knows Orko from the cartoon, the little wizard, but he floats around. And I guess for the movie, they thought, well, it'll be too expensive to have Orko hover around all the time, so they gave us another character called Gwildor, which everybody was like, who the hell is this Gwildor guy? Like, I don't know why they couldn't have just made Orko and just had Orko walk around, and they could have made him look like a Jawa or something. That would have worked for me. Instead, we got this stupid Gwildor character. So there was a lot about that movie that was a bit of a head scratcher. I won't say that I hated it as a kid, but it was just a curiosity because I couldn't understand why it was so different from the source material. Anyway, we barely got any figures from that movie when that movie came out, and I think it was because there was a bunch of license rights issues, like they couldn't make a He-Man that looked like Dolph Lundgren, etc., etc. So they made a couple random figures from the movie, but that was it. I've always kind of wanted figures from that movie because as time's gone on, I've kind of learned to love it and appreciate it as its own thing. And a couple of years ago, after apparently a lot of red tape and legal issues, Super 7 was finally able to make Masters of the Universe figures based on the movie, and I thought those figures were really awesome. So here, for example, is Skeletor. And so this is done in that ultimate style. So it's actually quite compatible with, say, Thulsa Doom. If I bring him back out now, it's the same type of design, the same buck, we say, the same like articulation, the same form factor. So yeah, you can pose these guys, display them on a shelf together, and they look great. Anyway, Super 7 gave us Skeletor, and I think he looks incredible. That was an awesome figure. Very happy to finally get him. They also gave us the Golden God version of Skeletor, which is what he evolves into by the end of the movie. And I also think they did a great job on him. Then they gave us Blade, another really cool figure. He fits in great with those guys. Then we got Sorod. This was pretty cool. And by the way, another thing about these two characters, they appeared in the movie and they had no established lore in the cartoons or the mini comics or anything. So again, as a kid, I was like, who the hell are these guys? Where's Mer-Man? Where's Triclops? Where's Trapjaw? Who are Blade and Sorod? And we also got Karg. This is another character who. So these were all Skeletor's henchmen. And it was like, who are these characters? I've grown to appreciate them in the years since, but at the time, it was a real head scratcher. However, there were two henchmen in the movie that we all knew, and that was Beastman and Evil Lyn. Now, for whatever reason, when Super 7 gave us all these figures, they didn't get around to either Beastman or Evil Lyn. I don't know if they were going to, but then they just ran out of time before they lost the license. Maybe they never intended to. Maybe they thought, there's already a lot of Evil Lyn and Beastman figures out there, but fans have been waiting for these guys, so that's why they gave them to us. But, and I should mention, I think some of these actually came from Mattel before Super 7 took the license. So these figures were maybe a combination of Mattel and Super 7. But anyway, I don't know why we didn't get Beastman and Evil Lyn. However, in this more recent wave of 7-inch Masters of the Universe figures, known as Masterverse, they have filled in some of those gaps. So they re-released some of these figures, the Skeletor and the He-Man. I thought they looked pretty shitty when compared to the Super 7 ones. So it was definitely a step down. But at least they gave us our first ever Evil Lyn. So this is the live-action movie version of Evil Lyn as part of the Masterverse line. So she came out just in like 2023, I think it was. Maybe it was even this year. I can't remember, but not that long ago. And so I'm happy I have her, but she's definitely a step down in quality from the Mattel and Super 7 stuff from the Classics line. This Masterverse version, the scale's just a little off. It's not super noticeable because she's a female, so the fact that she's a little bit more petite, it doesn't stand out as much that she's a different form factor than these other guys. Like, she has the increased articulation and all that sort of stuff. But like the double jointed knees and everything. Anyway, so I was happy to have her, but she left something to be desired. And now we get Beastman back there, and he also leaves a little something to be desired. And I don't think he really looks right with these other figures. He does kind of stand out. So here is Beastman with the rest of the gang. It kind of works. Like, at least now I can say I have the full villains on display. We're still missing a couple of the heroic characters. We still need a Man-at-Arms and a Teela to really have the full cast of characters. So I don't know if Mattel is planning on releasing those figures in the Masterverse line as well. It would kind of make sense that they do. They probably should. But I don't know if I need them because I didn't love the look of Man-at-Arms or Teela in the movie. And I didn't love the look of Beastman. But I kind of thought when I got this figure, maybe I would have softened to the look a little bit. But I haven't. I'll be honest, I don't like this figure. Not only do I not like the look of it, But it's one of those things that I didn't really see the design of this character until I had it in my hands because he didn't get a whole lot of screen time. Some of the scenes were in the dark. So it's kind of like the Muto. I'm seeing it the way it was meant to be seen for the first time, and it's kind of underwhelming. And the main thing for me is these stupid chaps that he has on. Like, he's got these leather sort of front pants. So you can see he's got just little shorts. And it's also weird how his hair hangs over the back of his shorts. That's kind of gross. Then he's got these hairy legs with these weird leather chaps. And I wouldn't even have a problem with it if he had like maybe a leather pad up here and another knee pad down here, but it's just the fact it's these big long pads that hang over the whole front of his legs. I think it's really visually unappealing and also just weird. Um, the rest of the armor here doesn't bother me too much, but I really don't like the head sculpt. And I was actually surprised how much it reminds me of Gwildor, the character from the movie, who had this similar kind of big bushy hair and beard. And I always thought Gwildor kind of sucked. And seeing Beastman like this, I'm like, yeah, this almost looks like he's got the same head as Gwildor. He's got the same little pointy ears and everything. And I don't like it. So I'll be honest, it's pretty rare when I buy an action figure I don't like. Like, obviously sometimes they disappoint me in certain ways. But yeah, this one here, I don't know. If I had seen it in a store and looked at it, even though I would think, well, maybe I should just get it anyway to finish my, collection of movie bad guys, I don't know if I would have. If I had this in my hand and was wondering if I wanted to spend the 30 to 40 bucks on it, I could see myself maybe passing. But I pre-ordered him online before I really knew what I was getting. Here he is. It's not terrible. Like, it's a well-made figure, I guess. His sword, he's got a nice big sword accessory. It can be sheathed, here on his waist. He's got some extra hands. These cuffs were packaged separately, like in the package. I had to put those on him. So they almost try and sell me those as extra accessories, but I really don't think they are. They should have just been on there in the first place. So anyway, it's not great. And maybe before we move on, I'll just do a little side by side with him and some other Beastmen. So here is the best figure to compare him to, I guess. This is the Beastman from the Masters of the Universe Classics. So this is my favorite line of He-Man figures. They're based on the classic, the retro toys, except they were made bigger with more articulation. I'm actually pretty surprised to see these two side by side, how much taller this figure is. I didn't even notice it when he was displayed next to all those other classics characters like Skeletor and Sorod. But yeah, here he's quite a bit taller than Beastman. It might be because Beastman is hunching a little bit. His knees are slightly bent here. But anyway, I am just surprised that this guy towers over him. And I'm starting to wonder if this guy's going to look really out of place when I go display him with my other figures, because I do have my Masterverse figures displayed next to my classics. So yeah, I don't know. A couple other Beastmen that I grabbed here. This is kind of the Primal Beastman or the Lords of Power Beastman. So it's kind of a different look too. And then I've got this guy here. I still keep him in his package, but this is the best rendition of Beastman I have based on his animated look. So that's how he would have appeared in the cartoons back when I was a kid. So you can see it was a pretty drastic change when they went from that to this. You can't get this figure to stand up. And I don't think it's necessarily his fault. I think he has a relatively solid base. He stands up okay. It's just he's got this big long sword and he's got this whip, and every time I try and move these figures around, they're getting caught on each other. But anyway, I don't have a whole lot more to say about Beastman here. It's he's a great character, but I think this is kind of a shitty toy. So these are the last figures that I'm going to talk about in this episode, and I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about them because they are older figures. They're new to me, but they've been released for several years now, some of these. So yeah, as you can see, these are some Star Wars Black Series. So this is Hasbro's line of 6-inch Star Wars figures. I have a pretty good sized collection of Black Series, but it has really died off for me in recent years. I'll be honest, I'm pretty over Star Wars. Just kind of underwhelmed by the new content and the toys that they are choosing to make. And even when they do make a toy of a character that I like, there's something about the aesthetic of Star Wars that just seems to be a step behind what Hasbro's doing with Marvel Legends and GI Joes. These figures just seem like lower tier figures, lower quality. And so yeah, I don't think I've bought a single Star Wars figure this year up to this point. I pre-ordered Hammerhead, and he's one of those original trilogy aliens that I love. And so I've got him on pre-order, so I'll have him before the end of the year. But I think that was the only figure I bought. So they've fallen quite a lot for me. That used to be one of my bigger collections. I was buying, 20, 30 Star Wars figures in a given year, and now it's down to like one. But anyway, I've got these guys. These are older figures, so you can see here. This is Lando Calrissian. And I'll just mention the reason I do have these figures now is my cousin Greg, who he played a very pivotal role in my life when I was young. It was my cousin Greg who got me into comic books. It was my cousin Greg who got me into listen to heavy metal music. And, I've gone on. I haven't stopped collecting comic books since that first day he introduced me to them. And I don't really listen to a whole lot of heavy metal now, but I still listen to punk and other heavy music and stuff. And so I owe a lot of that to my cousin Greg. But I haven't seen much of him in recent years because he moved to Ontario. I live in Nova Scotia. So, yeah, I see him every few years. Sadly, it tends to be the last couple of years I see him when he comes home for funerals. And most recently, he was here for my father's funeral about a month ago. And when he came, he brought me these toys. So he's a bit of a collector himself. And he said, well, you know what? I was driving up here for the funeral and I had some extra toys that I've been thinking about getting rid of. So I thought, I'll bring them up to you. He didn't know if I had these characters or not. And as it turned out, I didn't. So Lando Calrissian, he is from the original trilogy. I'm sure you all know who he is. Played by Billy D. Williams. This is a nice looking figure. The likeness is good. But just like I said with any of these Star Wars figures, I don't know, the build of them, the design of them, they just fall a little flat for me. This cape, the way it's just kind of a big solid piece of plastic that kind of hinders his movement. Now you can slide it off, okay, but like a soft goods cape probably would have been better. Anyway, so I got Lando. Now I did have a Lando in my collection. I had the young Lando from the Solo movie, and I also had him in his Jabba's palace disguise. So I kind of felt like I had him covered for the original trilogy and the newer stuff. So I didn't buy this kind of Bespin look when it first came out, but it is, in my mind, his most iconic look, his most recognizable look. So I'm glad that I was, gifted it, and I'll happily add him to my collection for free. Next up is Old Man Luke. So this figure came from The Force Awakens. So in The Force Awakens, Luke Skywalker only appeared in the last minute or so of the movie. When Rey showed up and handed him the lightsaber, and then we were all left wondering, what's he going to do with that thing? So yeah, this figure was based on that scene. Now, I don't know. I was already a little turned off by Star Wars by that point because I wanted figures from the original movies. I just really wasn't interested in a lot of the characters from the newer movies. But I did buy at least one version of most of the new characters. So I did buy a Rey, and I did buy a Finn, and I did buy a what's his face, Kylo Ren, and a couple other characters. But when it came to Luke Skywalker, even though this is kind of a new look for him with the gray beard and everything, I do have a couple Luke Skywalkers in my collection, such as like the TIE Fighter Luke and the Hoth kind of snowsuit Luke. So it's not like I needed a Luke, and this old man look, I wasn't really convinced. Maybe if he had done something really awesome in the next movie, I would have been more compelled to add this version of him to my collection. But yeah, I was a little disappointed with old man Luke. So yeah, this guy does have a soft goods cape, although I don't know if it works super well. It just seems kind of to hang there. Like that hood, it doesn't hug his face very realistically or anything. It just drapes over the back of him. So you can take that off. He came with, I think, an extra hand too, but that's about it. I don't think he came with a lightsaber or anything. So anyway, that's it for Old Man Luke. He's fine. Here we've got Chewbacca. Now this one actually my cousin didn't gift to me. Oh, I actually forgot one thing about Luke. It's sitting here right in front of me, but Luke actually came with this big display base. So this is the top of the mountain when Rey hands him the lightsaber. So you can see there's a little peg here where you can stand Luke and a little peg here where you can stand Rey. And, you know, it was probably just a way for them to charge a premium for that Luke Skywalker figure because he came in a much larger box than a standard figure. I'm not sure what it originally retailed for, but yeah, I'm happy that I got him for free. And this is kind of a neat accessory. It's the kind of thing I can maybe use elsewhere. I don't think I'm going to display it with Luke, but yeah, I'm sure I can find a use for it. It's a cool little display base. Anyway, back to Chewbacca. So this one my cousin Greg did not give to me. This one I actually bought at GameStop recently. It was in its $5 bin. So GameStop does a $5 Friday thing where they seem to throw some random stuff in a bin on Fridays. And if it doesn't sell on Friday, they mark it right back up to the regular price and put it back on the shelf. I don't really know why they do that. But anyway, Chewbacca, I actually did not have a Black Series Chewbacca. I've said this many times on the channel, but I'll repeat it here. When I first started Star Wars Black Series years ago, I did kind of make a rule that I wasn't going to buy the same old characters over and over again because I have such a huge collection of the smaller 3 3/4 inch Star Wars figures that I put a lot of time and money into. And I just, even though I prefer the 6-inch scale, it's just like, do I really need another R2D2 and another C3PO? So I didn't buy a lot of the core characters, which is why I didn't have Lando in his Bespin look. I don't have Farm Boy Luke, which is arguably his most iconic look. I don't have Chewbacca. I don't have C3PO. I don't have R2D2. I didn't have a lot of the main characters. I was mostly buying cool looking robots, cool looking aliens. So, yeah, over the years, I've kind of acquired more of the core cast than I really intended to. Maybe because I was either gifted them or I got them for sale or I got them as a gift or whatever. But when I saw this Chewbacca for $5, I thought, well, sure, I might as well have a Chewbacca. It's a decent looking figure anyway. Comes with his bowcaster there. So yeah, it's cool to finally have this Chewbacca. But I think this figure is a few years old. So anyway, that's that. And then lastly, we have Rey on her speeder, her like junky speeder here. This is actually really cool. I never would have bought this on my own because I don't know, this vehicle wasn't featured heavily in the movie, and this Rey, it's not the best Rey figure because her face is covered up. However, I actually ended up liking this quite a bit. So here's my Rey figure that I had bought when the movie first came out, and it is not a great Rey. Like the paint job on her face is pretty piss poor, to be honest with you. They improved these quite a bit when they switched to kind of the digital face printing a couple of years later. But at this point, they were still making pretty clunky looking figures. This definitely does not do Daisy Ridley justice. So yeah, that's the Rey figure that I have in my collection. So now I have this one. And you can see she comes on this speeder, which is a good sized vehicle. It's got multiple panels that come off, and it's got like gear inside that you can work on or whatever. So there's a couple panels. There's another one over here, I think. Anyway, I'm not going to wrestle with it, but you can see there's a panel there. And it's also cool that it's got this clear display base, which kind of looks like a little cloud to show that it's hovering. And that's got some articulation on it, so you can kind of make her go upwards, downwards, spin it around, tilt to the side. See these panels here also move to adjust to the wind. So there's lots of little moving pieces here. I really like this net on the side that looks like it's holding a bunch of junk. All that junk is actually just one piece of plastic, and it plugs into the side so it stays in place. But then you can put this net up here, and it looks pretty cool. This here is also her staff, so that can hook onto there, which is pretty cool, but it's also the same staff that, you see this figure, I have it displayed in her hand, so she can carry this around as a weapon as well. But I actually like this Rey figure quite a bit. So you can see she's got her goggles on, which you can't take off, but you can take this little mask off. And I think this figure actually looks better than this figure, because I think the bad paint on the face is what really hurts this one. And this one, where her face is mostly covered,
it solves most of that problem. And she's also got some nice soft goods here, where this one just had the plastic draped down, so I think the soft goods look better. She's got this backpack with some gear on it. So overall, this is actually a pretty nice figure. It's a pretty nice vehicle. Pretty good set overall. So this one was also a gift from my cousin Greg. So Greg, thank you for that. These are all pretty cool. I will happily display them on my Star Wars shelf. And it is kind of nice to get some new Star Wars figures every once in a while, even though I'm not really buying them too often myself. But yeah, this is pretty cool. Anyway, this video is going long, so I'm going to wrap things up.
Okay, so those were my latest miscellaneous action figures. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please make sure to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and leave me comments below. All that engagement helps the channel, helps it get recommended to other people, and yeah, I appreciate all of it. So yeah, please do that stuff, and I will see you soon with another video. Until then, ciao.
So yeah, I won't go into all the articulation.